Good morning, Hilton Baptist, and welcome to another devotion from Revelation. This time we are in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 to 10, and this is the famous or notorious passage, depending on how you want to see it, about the millennium. So much has been written in theology about the millennium, and the truth of the matter is that most of us have determined what we believe about how Jesus will return from these 10 verses, from how we understand and interpret the millennium. And that's probably not the way it should be, but it does cause us to need to pause and just to take a moment to understand what we mean by the millennium and what we mean by how it determines what we believe about how Jesus will return. And so I'm just going to pause for a bit and take a couple of sessions on this at the moment. So, firstly, what do we mean by the millennium? Well, I think if you read this passage, you'll see that it refers to the 1,000 years of Jesus' reign. 1,000 years when Jesus rules. And the big question is, when does that take place? When does the millennial rule of Jesus happen? So there are basically three different views. The first view is what is called premillennialism. And that believes that, if you like, you can describe it like this, that Jesus returns, Satan is bound, and a 1,000-year rule of Jesus begins here on earth. Just before the end of that 1,000-year rule, Satan is released again, and then he's captured, and then he's thrown into the lake of fire, and then the new creation comes about and we go into eternity. If you read Revelation 20 literally, that is the most likely understanding you'll have of it. The second view is the amillennial view, and amillennialism basically believes that there is no literal millennium, that it is symbolic. The rule of Christ and the binding of Satan, according to this view, happened at the first coming of Jesus. That's what Jesus achieved when he came the first time. That doesn't mean to say there's no more evil in the world, and of course there is, but that happens through the beasts because Satan has been bound. And just before Jesus returns, Satan will be unbound. There'll be a bit of chaos. It'll all build up to the final battle, which won't be a battle at all. Jesus will return, and then the new creation will come about. And if you read Revelation 20 with numbers being symbols and events not following on historically one after the other, but more the next event is the next thing John saw rather than the next thing that happens, then you'll probably come to that interpretation. There's a third view, which is not as popular today, although it was very popular in the 19th century, and that is postmillennialism. And that is that Satan is bound at a point in what is known as the church age, in the age after Jesus' first coming. The church grows and grows and builds itself up and gets stronger and stronger. And eventually the church itself brings about the millennial rule of Jesus. And that becomes very evident for a period of about 1,000 years. And then just before Jesus' return, Satan is unbound again. And there's a lot of evil, but he's finally defeated. Jesus returns and the new creation starts. Those are the three views that have been held throughout most of history and really determine what we believe about the second coming. And I want to say that there are strengths and weaknesses of each position. The post-millennial view believes in the transforming power of the gospel. It believes that as the work of the gospel goes out, as the Holy Spirit works in the lives of people, the church gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So strong, in fact, that it's as if the millennium starts. I think that's too optimistic. I think it underestimates the power of evil. But it's good to see the gospel as being so powerful. The premillennial view, I think, gives too much power to evil, not enough power to the transforming work of the gospel. It is too pessimistic. But what it does do is really looks forward to Jesus' return. And I think we could all do with a greater sense of expectation that Jesus is coming. The amillennial view is probably the most faithful to the biblical text if you see numbers as symbols. But it can fall into the trap of not taking sin and evil seriously enough, and of kind of losing perspective of the importance of Jesus' return. And so we have to guard against that. And so I think instead of fighting each other and accusing each other, which we've tended to do because we don't believe the other view of the other person, that we actually need to learn from each other, take the strengths of each view into account, and have a godly gospel understanding of how Jesus is going to come again. So what is that view that we should have? Well, whatever your view of millennialism, this is true for you. The future is not up for grabs. It is not a contest as to whether Jesus or Satan will win. Satan is bound, and he will be thrown into the lake of fire, along with those two terrible beasts. Jesus has won. And how did he win? He won on the cross. And so we have to understand that the rule of Jesus is not as a lion, but as a lamb. And so that says a lot about how the church should influence society and influence the world. Power can be such a dangerous thing. And we influence, and Jesus rules as a lamb, not as a lion. It also means that the best is yet to come. How great is that? When Jesus returns, it will be glorious. And that future is not in our hands. That will happen when Jesus determines it to be. In fact, when the Father says to Jesus, it's time to go, then he will go. And that time will come about. And that is a great thing. In the meantime, let's not forget, Jesus has defeated evil on the cross. We, his people, are ruling with him in the world, not as lions, but as lambs. And so our influence, maybe as salt and light, should be seen, and we should be working harder to make our influence felt. The gospel needs to change our lives. Has it changed yours? Has it changed mine? In the end, Jesus is returning. We look forward to that with great glory, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. God bless. See you then.